Recording in progress.
Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got a lot of football to talk about with some IndyCar at the end. We're going to talk about the Colts loss to the Rams week 2 of the season as the Colts dropped to 0-2. We're also going to talk about the most exciting team in Indiana college football. We're going to
Is there really one?
I mean, we pick one. It doesn't mean there's necessarily
This was a rough weekend
Yeah.
for sports in the state of Indiana.
It really-
or Central Indiana, I should say. Central Indiana.
Yeah, it really was. And then you also have the championship weekend for IndyCar as they wind down their 2021 season. So, a lot to talk about tonight. But first, B. Scott, how was your weekend, man?
It was good. Highlighted by going to see the Paw Patrol movie last night.
Yeah, I saw the pictures on Instagram. It was absolutely adorable. Jillian getting a chance to go to the movie. You said that was the first time she's been to the movies, right?
First time at the movies, and I guess it was so adorable that the writer and director of the Paw Patrol movie liked the tweet.
B. Scott just making connections everywhere. Hey,
doing what I do. Network.
Hey, Paw Patrol, come on the show. Let's get the creator of Paw Patrol on the show. Paw
Patrol, we're on a roll. I'll interview Chase.
Yeah, I think it's only fair. We need to get we gotta get his thoughts on Air Bud, man. We gotta figure out if
I don't know. I think I'm more aligned with Rocky. I mean, this dog is a recycling pup, and he builds things out of whatever he's got in the back of his recycling truck. I think I could hit it off with Rocky.
Yeah, I mean the whole gang really is
Rubble will hit up the all-you-can-eat buffet with you.
Yeah, I think that's the next that's the next fantasy draft of which Paw Patrol character would you want to start your NFL franchise with? I think that's the perfect conversation. But let's go ahead.
Definitely not Marshall. Marshall's got the butterfingers and the dropsies and falls over easily.
I got you. So he's who was it for the Colts? Like Darius Hayward-Bay or somebody who always had the drop. Hank Baskett maybe. He's the guy who muffed the onside kick.
Yeah, but Darius Hayward-Bay as well.
But let's go ahead. Speaking of former Colts and now current Colts, let's get into the podcast here. Week 2 of the NFL season. Colts host the Rams. Can the Colts come back and right the ship after losing week 1? And so here's a summary of the game. Scoring starts off. The only touchdown of the first half really was a pass from Matt Stafford to Cooper Kupp, 16 yards for a touchdown to get things kicked off. The Rams led 10-6 at the half. The teams traded touchdowns in the third quarter. First, it was a 2-yard touchdown run by Darrell Henderson for LA. Then Carson Wentz threw a 8-yard touchdown pass to Zach Pascal. He's been finding Pascal quite a bit. That seems to be the combination. In the fourth quarter, it was a very interesting fourth quarter to say the least. The Colts recovered a botched punt in the end zone for a touchdown. Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp gives the Rams the lead again. So after the Rams lose the lead, they get it right back. With 7:22 left to go in the fourth quarter, Rodrigo Blankenship hits a 35-yard field goal. It ties the game, but on that drive, Carson Wentz rolls his ankle. He's unable to return. Matt Gay hits a 38-yard field goal with 2:23 left to give the Rams the 27-24 advantage. And then Jacob Eason, first drive coming in, can he get it done? First pass is an incompletion. Second pass is an interception to Jalen Ramsey, one of the best DBs in the game. He gets the pick, and the game is over. Looking at the Colts statistics, Carson Wentz was 20 for 31 with 247 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Michael Pittman had 8 catches for 123 yards. Matthew Stafford, 19 of 30 with 278 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Cooper Kupp. Kupp had 9 catches for 163 yards and those 2 aforementioned touchdowns. So Colts start 0-2. Not anything really, B. Scott, we didn't see coming. We both thought that the Colts would struggle these first couple of weeks, and they absolutely have. And honestly, for me, it comes down. I obviously we're no NFL coaches, but just from our chairs, I just think that the coaches need to reevaluate their strategy or their play calling. Something is just not right so far. The Colts now, we talked about it a little bit last week, the Colts are now 0-4 this season on fourth down. I mentioned last week that they last year converted 60% of their fourth down plays, and that's something that Coach Reich has kind of been kind of made part of his offense is, hey, you know what, we've crunched the numbers, and analytically it makes sense to go on these fourth downs in these situations, but so far the Colts are 0-4. Wentz is sacked on 4th and goal on the opening possession. Obviously, we don't know if the game plays out exactly the same as it does, but obviously, when you're right there in field goal range and you lose by a field goal, that definitely is something that you come back and kind of say, hey, you know what? Those are points that we would have liked to have in a 3-point game. And then the Colts were 1-4 in the red zone on Sunday. Wentz throws an interception on 3rd and goal, which that drive had followed when the Colts get an interception. So, I mean, we last 2 weeks, we've basically boiled down kind of what the momentum swings were and what led ultimately to the Colts losing, and I think you can kind of attribute that to those two things that I mentioned. I mean, you look at the 4th down and goal, they go for it, don't get it, and those are 3 points that in a 3-point game you'd love to have, and then you have Wentz throwing an interception right after, you got momentum. You just got an interception yourself. You have an opportunity to, at minimum, get 3 points. Still don't come away with anything. It's a little shovel pass that gets intercepted by the Rams. Now, one thing I will say is good on the coaching side of things is the fact that I think it was the right call leaving Wentz on the bench, not forcing him to go back out there, because at the end of the day, it is still week 2 of a 17-game season, so you don't necessarily need to rush him back out there, especially with his injury-prone history. And we'll now we find out that he's got sprained ankles on 2 sprained ankles.
I don't buy it.
You don't?
I don't buy it. I don't believe it's just a sprain. You go back, watch that replay of, I believe it was his right ankle, the way it got caught underneath him and popped back around, or popped. So it popped. You can see a pop. There's something more than 2 sprained ankles. I'm sorry. There is something more there, and we're just not being told. Because that video, when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, how in the world is he even walking? That ankle, it looked like it broke, or at least dislocated, or maybe not dislocated, because he wouldn't be walking with dislocated. But it did not look good when you watch the replay, and especially when you see it in slow-mo. It definitely pops. So I don't buy that it's 2 sprained ankles.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, hopefully sprained would be better than broken, so hopefully.
Not necessarily.
You don't think so? Oh yeah, because isn't with sprains?
If it's a high sprain, that lingers.
I was gonna say, don't they usually
a long time?
Don't they usually say that, like, when you sprain your ankle, it's better to have broken it than to sprain it? Isn't that what they say? Okay.
Oh yeah, because there's really nothing you can do other than just, like, I mean, they have treatment that they can go through, but I mean, it's just a sprain just lingers, whereas a break, it's fixed, takes some time to heal, you're good. And it's much better to break than it is to sprain.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then of course, like I said, I think it's the right call ultimately to leave him on the bench. The timing of the injury just stinks, because obviously it's right before you have.
It makes sense, because the fewer snaps that he plays, the less likely we are to have to give our first-round pick to Philadelphia. And at this rate, it looks like it's going to be a pretty darn good first-round pick as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's just rough. I think that, it's just tough. Carson Wentz, did play well ultimately.
Oh yeah,
but and he has been. But I mean, I would just think that in late in a game, you would not be thinking, okay, well, let's leave him on the bench in a game that you feel like you'd rather start 1-1 than 0-2. But I mean, yeah, definitely, it looks like.
Well, like he said, there really was no choice for him.
Right.
He could not put any pressure on it, and I'm right. Yeah, it's the foot he throws off of. So you need him to do a game-winning drive. You can't keep pressure out of his face, and you're expecting him to throw off of an ankle that is not in good shape. Come on. He wasn't coming back in. I mean, unless he was 100% healthy, he'd be back in. But there's no way he could have gone back in that game.
Right.
You know, for me, okay, so essentially the sky's not falling. Let's just put it that way. 0-2. A lot of people predicted 0-2. It's 0-2 against two NFC West teams. But what we need to put to bed right now, we need to put to bed this team being a Super Bowl contender. That's not happening. That's just not happening. 2 weeks in a row playing against Super Bowl caliber teams. And yeah, we played better against the Rams, but still not good enough. I'm on the same boat as a lot of other people. I do believe Darius Leonard is injured because he's in on some plays and then he disappears for several others. I don't know. Where's Xavier? What's going on with Xavier Rhodes? I mean, dude's been MIA after getting torched in camp. So is he just like, man, I can't do this anymore and calling it done? There's a lot of question marks there. Obviously, the secondary was always going to be a big question mark. The thing that I'm still scratching my head about the most, though, this offensive line. How is an offensive line that is supposed to be so good now this bad? This is like watching early Andrew Luck years. You know, I will say the left side of the line played a lot better with Eric Fisher in there, even though he was limited. They pretty much had him on a snap count. And Quentin Nelson did really well against Aaron Donald. The only time Aaron Donald really got anything is when they bumped him over to the right side, obviously going up against Mark Lewinsky and Julian Davenport at right tackle in for Braden Smith. So, I mean, if the Colts are serious about wanting to be contenders, they really need to start looking at the veteran free agent market right now. There's several players out there that could be really good contributors for this team because this team needs help in a lot of areas. And I haven't even gotten to wide receiver. Offensive line, I mean, Mitchell Schwartz is still out there, guys. If you need somebody, he's more serviceable than Julian Davenport, for goodness sakes. I mean, come on. Anything's better than what he's putting out there. There's several good offensive linemen. We need help in the secondary. I mean, kick the tires on Richard Sherman now that the NFL is investigating his arrest back in July, which may turn out to be a mental health issue that he was going through at the time. And, you know, that might be a game suspension just for being arrested. There's several players out there at that. Wide receiver, you're a little bit more limited at. I mean, Golden Tate, how many times has he said that he'd want to come play for the Colts? I mean, bring him in. Anything's got to be better because right now it's Michael Pittman and Zach Pascal. We need to figure out that, hey, guess what? Paris Campbell's never going to be an option. He's played 10 games in his 3-year career. I think it's about time for the Colts to kind of step away from that Ohio State pipeline because the last 2 big names they got from Ohio State couldn't stay on the field. That's got to change. It has to change. And, I mean, right now, the highest drafted wide receiver on this Colts offense right now is the 2nd-round pick, Michael Pittman. I mean, that's really good. That's high. Everybody else is either undrafted or a very late round draft pick. It's tough to build around that. I know Chris Ballard preaches, we want to build this from home. We want to grow it. We want to, grow our own, we this, that, and it's the other. It's like, come on. Eventually you have to stop that because it's at certain positions because it's not working. It's just not working. When your wide receivers can't get any separation. Your offensive line, I don't know what's going on there now. We do know that Quentin Nelson's Quentin Nelson, but I don't know. Is it the health? I cannot figure out what's going on with this team. Yes, we played two very good teams, but the expectations for this Colts team coming into this season were that they were going to be playoff contenders, not just playoff contenders for the division title, potentially making a push towards a Super Bowl. And I'll tell you what, right now, I highly doubt this team could, unless they win the division, this is not a playoff caliber team. This is just not. The blocking even for the running game isn't there. Poor Jonathan Taylor. He's getting hit and carrying tacklers, thankfully, but that can't last forever. And then the play calling is another thing. I'm just so confused about the play calling. Like, for 3 straight plays, you're on the 1 yard line. You can't punch it in. So what do you do on 4th down? You drop back and try to pass it with not even pretending that you're going to try to run the ball. You move Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield into the slot. It's like, then you wonder why there's nobody there for any extra pass protection. So you wonder why Carson Wentz took a 10-yard sack. It's just like, come on. Somebody needs to tell Frank Reich that, hey, guess what, coach? If we don't convert it on 4th down, they get the ball back. For some reason, I don't believe that he understands that. And it's really starting to show. I understand wanting to be aggressive and trying to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. But, you didn't get it in on 3 straight plays, basically running the same thing from the 1 yard line. Take the points. Guess what? Those 3 points that you would have been guaranteed 3 points right there. That would have gone a long way there at the end. So I don't know. It's so confusing, the play calling. And then, last week Nyheim Hines had a good game, and we rewarded him with that contract extension and everything. He saw, I think it was, I read 3 snaps. 3? Yeah, they got Marlon Mack more involved, so I'll give you that a little bit, but 3? He's a player, he's probably, outside of Jonathan Taylor, the most electrifying player on your offense right now. And I'm not saying that to bash him by what he means, by whatsoever. He is. He's the most electrifying player on that offense next to Jonathan Taylor. Anytime Nyheim Hines gets the ball in his hands, he is a threat to score. So you give him 3 snaps? Come on. If there's not good protection for the passer, Nyheim Hines is a player that you can dump it out to, and he's going to create yards on his own. He's a good security blanket to have. So you don't play him. I guess that makes sense. I don't know. But this team, the sky's not falling. I know making it sound like the sky's falling, but it's not. 0-2 against 2 teams from the NFC. You still have a full slate of all 6 games against your division. However, it looks like you're most likely going to be having to go into Tennessee without your starting quarterback, as Tennessee's playing better now. Tennessee just, I guess.
I was going to say, we can't even say what we did last week, which was at least Tennessee lost 2, so, that's good. And it looked like
and what's sad is that Tennessee actually lost to a team that Tennessee beat a team that beat us.
Yeah.
But apparently, even with the officials, we're trying to took away so many points from Tennessee. Tennessee kept losing had points taken off the scoreboard because of you stepped out of bounds, and so the touchdown was overturned, or no, that was not a safety. Russell Wilson turned out he was not in the end zone, or those types of things. And they were trying everything to help Seattle win. Tennessee still won, so that means this Tennessee team's riding the ship. Apparently, though, Taylor Lewan, their left tackle, did injure his knee in pregame. So I don't know how big of a deal that's going to be. But right now, the Colts can't produce any sort of pass rush. So I don't think it really matters.
Right. Yeah. So coming off what some of the things you said, I remember a tweet I saw earlier today that was like, we have to remember that it's year 5 for Reich and company. It's not year 1, and like you gotta and it kind of some of the conversations that like I've seen and kind of what you're bringing up is like, Chris, it kind of came up we're during the draft, like when we were like, what the heck is happening? Because, Chris Ballard has a method. Like Frank Reich has a method, and we've trusted that method to this point. But at the same time, like they, even when it doesn't work, they still go with it. And yes, there's something to be said about staying, within yourself and doing, sticking to your plan no matter what what gets thrown at you. But the thing is that everything's fluid. Things change over time. It doesn't just like, oh, you can't just keep grinding away at whatever plan you have and then just expect it to work out flawlessly no matter what. Like there's things that can change, and that kind of is what you're bringing up in the whole like try out some other receivers even though they want to build in house. Start maybe drifting away from being so aggressive because it's not working, and maybe if you take the points or if you try to be a little bit more creative in what you're doing, then maybe you can start going for it on 4th down again and things like that. So yeah, it doesn't get any easier next week, and we'll see if Jacob Eason can rebound and if he does end up being the starter, or hopefully Carson Wentz can come back. But yeah, it's just something. I mean, someone I saw on Twitter was bringing up like maybe Frank Reich should give up the play calling. I'm not 100% there yet after 2 bad games.
Who's he going to give it off to? Because our offensive coordinator is a first-year offensive coordinator. It's not like he's handing it off to Matt Sirianni, who, okay, that's fine. I think our offensive coordinator is Joe Brady.
Yeah.
I believe. He's good. I'll give it. But, he doesn't have the experience of calling plays. It's just, I don't even know if it's really the play call. It's
just the strategy.
A little bit of the strategy. It's not geared towards exactly the way the team's playing. It's geared towards how they believe the team should be playing.
Right.
Some things, and I don't know. And I feel like if there's a time for Chris Ballard to open the pocketbook, and not be so tight with it, it is now. I mean, you have an owner that keeps saying Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, but yet the roster doesn't say Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. I mean, on paper, potentially, yes. Not the wide receiving core. I'm sorry, they haven't given that enough attention at all, and it's showing that they're not giving it enough attention. So I don't know what else to do other than we need to start looking at maybe I can't say trades because we don't have anything to trade.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would just be interesting to see what they can do. We won't. I mean, I feel like we've kind of hammered home all the points. So I don't want to get too much. I don't want to talk too much in circles here. But yeah, I mean, because on the one hand you have the fact that like this is hands down the toughest schedule or one of the tougher schedules in the league. I mean, you don't want to give them a free pass because like, oh, we're playing the NFC West and the AFC East, which combined those divisions have like 7 playoff teams between out of 8 plus the one division opponent that you play twice that's also got Super Bowl aspirations. So like it's a tough schedule, and so I mean it doesn't get any easier, and it's a rough start, but at the same time, like you said, this is a team that's been thinking that they're Super Bowl caliber that is not playing up to that ability. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we've seen the Colts start, worse and get better as the season goes on, and hopefully that'll be more of the case. And then like I said, a couple weeks ago when we did the Colts preview, Frank Reich is undefeated as the head coach when he's played in Nashville. So we'll see if that rings true. But yeah, that'll be all for our Colts conversation for this week. We'll go ahead and move it on to our college football conversation. But before we do that, let's go ahead and thank our friends of the show. First, we want to talk about Anchor. Anchor allows us to put the podcast on every week. They have this great platform where you can record your podcast either directly on Anchor or load it in from somewhere else into Anchor, and they will take your feed and distribute your podcast to a bunch of different platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Really get your exposure out there, and it's really awesome. We've been very lucky to be able to use Anchor. We also love Anchor because of the ability to archive your broadcasts. There's other sites that only give you a limited number of hours, limited number of minutes that you can use. Anchor doesn't do any of that, and they also give you pretty much a free ad right away. If you plug their channel, they will allow you to monetize your content right away, which is really nice. So Anchor does a lot of great things. And then also we want to give a shout out to Eat Lunch and Board Game. That's my cousin's podcast, all about board gaming and the connections you can build through that. He has a guest on, I think, like every week or every other week, which is really cool. So he is really grinding hard. So if you like board games, go check that one out. He supports our show, so we want to give that support right back. And then we want to also remind you guys that you can follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. You can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Go over to our YouTube channel, 3C Media on YouTube. That's where you can not only catch the MCT podcast, but you can also catch the Crash Course Podcast every week, and some more YouTube content we're grinding out there. Of course, we have the road trip vlog that we put out a couple of weeks ago. That's done really well. You guys have done a great job of supporting the podcast on the YouTube channel, so thank you guys all for that support. And then also we have a TikTok, 3C Media on TikTok. We've got some TikTok only content that's over there. I have a segment called Small Talk, which I basically say, hey, you know what, if you see a person with this hat on for this team, this is what you would want to talk about. So just kind of some quick hit content like that. Also, CraigCrash Wheel of Misery. Right now we're 3-0 against the spread, 2-1 outright this year on our prediction. So that's pretty cool for college football. And then remember, you can watch us live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. That's where you can catch us live. You can interact with us in chat, like Elle Meredith writes. She's here. She said she's late, but you know what? We don't care. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're here supporting the show, as always. And then also Dusty in the chat saying "Go Lions." She's asking if Aaron Rodgers threw last week. Nope. The Saints, I think, just kind of caught the Packers a little bit off guard, and we'll see if they can bounce back. I'm hoping he does. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is on one of my fantasy teams, and I need him to score 43, which is like a lot, but also not doable either. Like, Aaron Rodgers can have a 45-point night, so like, I'm really hoping that happens, especially against the Lions, so we will see. And then remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So, I know that was all a mouthful. Thank you guys for staying through that. I probably need to figure out a way to consolidate that so it's not like a 3 or 4 minute segment every time, but we'll go from there, especially because I have everything that I tell you also on the screen. But you know what? Some of you aren't watching on YouTube. Some of you are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and we love you. So let's go ahead now and move on over to talk about the collegiate football endeavors of the state of Indiana as we move away from the NFL. If you watched us in our pregame or our preseason special for Indiana college football, we did something called the Indiana Ambassador Rankings. That was a way for us to rank the exciting teams around the state. Obviously, if we just ranked flat on skill, obviously, you could pretty much guess what those rankings would look like. Notre Dame would be at the top. They would never move. It would be boring. So we're like, hey, what teams excite us around the state? What teams can we talk about that we don't typically talk about? And so here's how the rankings look like in the preseason. We had Ball State number 1 coming off of their amazing 6-1 MAC championship, first bowl win in school history season. We had IU at number 2 because they had big aspirations. We thought, hey, they're ranked 17th. They are
who I thought they were.
Their fan base was very excited. Thought there was
they're so boring now that the fan base is tearing out bleachers and crowd surfing them down from the top of the stadium. You know who's going to be really upset about that? Not the athletic department, the geese that are going to have to come in and take over those empty seats as the season progresses.
They're really upset about that. Like, you're messing up our real estate here.
Where am I supposed to go poop if I'm a goose? Where?
Honestly,
for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a big thing, I think it was last year or the year before, where like half the IU football stadium was empty during a football game, and like all the bleachers, actually it was the Purdue IU game, I think, and or I don't know which one, but all the bleachers that were not filled were just covered in goose poop. Just absolutely covered in goose poop. Like, they had no idea they were having a football game, and they were like, oh my gosh, we should have probably cleaned these off. Like, huh?
Also, I need to contact our editor to clip out. Where am I supposed to poop? We need to use that as a soundbite whenever we need it. We had Notre Dame at number 3 because they were just kind of bland. They're where they usually are every year. Can they do something to impress us? Marion from the NAIA we had at 4. And then we had Purdue at 5. So now we, looking back at this past weekend, we had 2 of those teams play. Number 12 Notre Dame against Purdue. The Fighting Irish do get the win, 27-13. It was 10-3 Notre Dame at halftime. A 62-yard pass to Avery Davis for Notre Dame makes it 17-6. Jack Plummer had a touchdown pass to Milton Wright. He gets the Boilers back within 4. But then a Kyron Williams 51-yard touchdown run makes it 27-13, and that is the final score. Jack Cohn was 15-30 for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns for Notre Dame. Avery Davis had 5 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. Jack Plummer for the Boilers, 25 for 36, 187 yards and a touchdown. We also had IU. They fell to 1-2. Number 8 Cincinnati beats the Hoosiers, 38-24. Michael Penix had 2 touchdown passes to give IU the early 14-0 lead. Cincinnati fans were definitely not excited about that one. But it was 14-10 Hoosiers at the half. After losing the lead, DJ Matthews had a touchdown run to give IU the 21-17 lead in the third quarter. But then that ensuing kickoff, Trey Tucker runs it back 99 yards for a touchdown to answer. It's 24-23 IU after the third. In the fourth quarter, Desmond Ridder throws a 19-yard touchdown pass to Alec Pierce, and then Ridder runs it in 7 yards for a touchdown. They get the 2-point conversion, which makes it the 38-24 final score. Michael Penix Jr. was 17 for 40, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Desmond Ridder was 20 of 36 for 210 yards, a touchdown and interception. Jerome Ford, 20 carries, 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alec Pierce, 5 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown for the Bearcats. So let's go ahead and look at what the Indiana Ambassador rankings look like now as far as what teams excite us across the state. So we'll go 1 through 5 here. Number 1 for us is going to be, B. Scott and I are in agreement on this all the way through. Notre Dame is number 1. And the reason why they're number 1, it's more or less by default. They're holding number 1 by the hair on their chinny chin chin. You know,
I had it as 1A and 1B.
You know the goatee that the Irish mascot has. That's the hair that they're clinging on to that one spot in our rankings, because they're the best and likely only shot an Indiana school has at the college football playoff. So, B. Scott, you and I were talking about, before the show, that there's a possibility, at least I think so, that if they lose one game, which I think in my opinion, the way they've looked the first few weeks of the season, where, they needed overtime to beat Florida State, who's now 0-3 after getting their doors blown off by Wake after losing on a Hail Mary to Jacksonville State. Notre Dame barely squeaked past Toledo, winning 32-29. Now, granted, Toledo has gone into places like Arkansas and won. They've gone into Minnesota when Minnesota had Marion Barber and won. They, if you remember him, that's a name out of the hat. And then...
Oh, Purdue fans know Marion Barber.
Yes, true. Toledo has a history of being just a school that can get it done on the road in a hostile environment.
Toledo's gone into Purdue and beaten Purdue.
Right. And so, I mean, still though, I mean, it was similar to the game that Ball State played against them a few years ago. As far as being really close, but. Just Notre Dame doesn't look very good, and then they play number 18 Wisconsin at Soldier Field this Saturday. So that or the Cincinnati game, I see them losing one or both of those games. But losing one, in my opinion, puts them out of the college football. I mean, they won't truly be out until the rankings are put out or they lose 2 games. But I mean, even comparing them with other teams that are ahead of them, like let's talk about Clemson, number 9. Their one loss right now is to Georgia, so that already is a better loss should Notre Dame lose to anybody else on their schedule. You have, Ohio. Well, I don't know, Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State's in front of them. Their loss to Oregon doesn't look as bad as whoever Notre Dame might lose to. So, I mean, there's other teams that I think would get in over Notre Dame should they lose, and like I said, I think they're on the path to losing.
I mean, if they lose to Cincinnati's ahead of them.
Right. Well, Cincinnati's already ahead of them.
Cincinnati's got a clearer path into the playoff than Notre Dame does. Honestly, I believe because of how front-loaded Notre Dame's schedule is, their back end of their schedule is very winnable. And they could easily, I guess you're right, they could back into a playoff spot, but with everybody else having such stronger schedules that time of year than Notre Dame, it's going to be tough. I mean, I don't know. It would be a very strong, a big uphill battle for Notre Dame to back their way into a playoff spot with one loss. There's a lot of other teams that have one loss that would get in ahead of them.
That's what I'm saying.
But it's just basically that. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying is that their only way to get in, I guess I could have phrased that better. The only way they're going to get in is if they back their way in. Kind of like what they did last year when there was really no choice because like the 8 teams behind them also lost their championship games. So the committee was like, what do we do? Let's take Notre Dame. So yeah, they definitely have it tough. So we'll see. So the number 1 for now. We'll see what happens going forward. Now number 2 on our list, and B Scott, I made them number 2 before you even looked at the list. So I mean, we can't call you a homer here. Number 2, and like you said, they're 1A and 1B for you, and I honestly agree. Purdue,
because I say 1A and 1B because I'm not looking at from a playoff potential. I don't think Notre Dame's a playoff caliber team this year. So I'm basing off of you know how we kind of started off as the exciting factor. Yeah. Purdue has been much more exciting this year to watch than Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been kind of like nail biter exciting just because like, oh, are they going to pull this out? Whereas Purdue, they've just been exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're coming off their loss to Notre Dame, but Purdue has looked strong in their first 3 weeks of the season. You have Jack Plummer right now completing 72% of his passes, 7 touchdowns to no interceptions, which is really cool. Of course, we were in attendance game 1 against Oregon State. The house was rocking. Really fun environment there. Go check out the vlog on YouTube. 3C Media. And then they do play Illinois, Minnesota, both winnable games. The Illini are 1-3, having lost 3 straight, including a loss to UT San Antonio. Minnesota fell to Ohio State on the opening Thursday, squeaked by Miami of Ohio by 4 before blowing out Colorado 30-0. So those, in theory, I'm going to say in theory because I'm not going to say they are, because that means next week they're going to go out and lose to Illinois. But they should be, in theory, tune-up games for them to then play number 5 Iowa and number 18 Wisconsin in back-to-back weeks in mid-October. So that's what makes them exciting, because they could at that point be what, 5-1?
No, 4-1.
4-1. Okay, so at that point they could be 4-1. Math is hard. They could be 4-1 going into those games. That, I mean, I'm not really 1,000% sold on Iowa. I'm really surprised that they got all the way up to number 5. I know it's because Iowa State was highly ranked. I'm not saying Iowa's overrated. I just think, so I guess technically I am, but like I don't think they're
look
5.
at Iowa's wins. Iowa's first 2 wins of the season were big wins over ranked opponents. I mean, they blew the doors off of, at the time, number 17 Indiana, and then they beat Iowa State. They did struggle a little bit early on against Kent State, and then they righted that ship and blew them out as well. I'll tell you what, when I look at the Purdue schedule, I don't see Purdue going into Iowa and beating Iowa. I think more so you get through that game and head into at home against number 18 Wisconsin and pull an upset there. That's the way I look at but I'll tell you what, even looking at the Purdue schedule, if Purdue were to beat every unranked team on the remainder of their schedule and lose to every ranked team on the remainder of their schedule, that still finishes the season 7-5.
Yeah, which is right where we have.
Remember how I said that first game against Oregon State was a crucial game? Yes, It was. Just like these next 2 games are crucial as well. They're all crucial at this point, but when you play in the Big Ten, going into the Big Ten season, they're all crucial. But to be able to start off the Big Ten season 2-0 would put them right up there in the catbird, especially with 2 division opponents, would put them up there battling at least going into Iowa for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but
see, that's why they're the excitement ratings, because it could happen. And that's what makes them exciting, because if they're 4-1...
If there is a team in the Big Ten that Jeff Brom has the number of, not called Ohio State because he's 1-0 against Ohio State, but it is Iowa. He is 3-1 at Purdue against Iowa, and he's had some big wins at Iowa. I mean, obviously, year 1, they went in there with their season essentially on the line and pulled off a pretty big stunner in Iowa City.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for what they can do, so that's why they are number 2. Number 3 for us is Ball State. They dropped from 1 to 3. They struggled with Western Illinois week 1. They lost to Penn State, which obviously that was expected, but then they get obliterated in Laramie against Wyoming. And it doesn't get any easier with the Toledo team that lost to Notre Dame by 3 and a Western Michigan team the following weekend that is 2-1, including a win this past weekend over Pitt. So it doesn't get any easier for Ball State. That's why they're 3, because our rankings are just top 5, so like 3 obviously right in the middle. And it's kind of like we were with Notre Dame, where like, okay, the ceiling is you could get up there, but also, we're not super impressed with where you are right now. So you're either going to go up, you're going to win against Toledo and Western Michigan, and we're going to shoot you up the rankings, or you're going to lose to Toledo and Western Michigan, and you're going to probably fall out because you're going to be in really dire straits to even try to make another MAC championship game. So, so Ball State right in the middle for me. As far as, hey, I still have hope that they can right the ship and get to where we believe they could be preseason, but also I'm ready to just say, all right, you're just going to drop down. Obviously, it's not destined for Ball State to have 2 really great seasons in a row. So, you know what? Maybe it's just time to bite that bullet, but we'll see. I'm still leaving them at number 3.
Hey, you know what? I mean, just like Purdue, I guess even more so, I feel like the non-conference really does not matter all that much for Ball State. Was Ball State going to be contending for a playoff spot?
Yes.
No, they weren't.
Yes,
they were. They just weren't. What really starts mattering is now. Going into the MAC conference schedule, remember, this is Ball State only played MAC opponents last year until the bowl game. And that is where they really shined. So I think they can do that again. they have the ability to right the ship and jump back up in these rankings because now they're getting into the bread and butter of their schedule where I think they're going to excel.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Wyoming is not a slouch of a football program. And having to go all the way out to Wyoming, that is not easy. There's a lot of factors there. That is also you're playing it is
the highest.
It's you're playing up in thin air. So I mean, it's not an easy game to play. It's a lot of things are stacked against you going into that game. So like I said, I'm not worried. In week 1, struggling against Western Illinois, the FCS. I cover FCS now, and I'll tell you what. The talk is how many games each week can the FCS pull over FBS teams, and they just play up for them. I mean, is Washington really that bad losing to Montana? I mean, Montana's really good,
yeah.
but they just played up, and it was week 1. Week 1, a lot of teams come out of the gate slow in week 1, and that's what these types of things happen. So I'm not panicking about Ball State at all. I think Ball State will be fine, and I think we'll potentially see Ball State playing in Detroit again come December.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that that's why they're in the middle, because these next 2 weeks are going to be pivotal because those are two teams that you're likely going to be fighting against to get to Detroit. So number 4 for us is our token non-FBS school. We have to, and actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that because I actually am very excited to have the Indiana Wesleyan Wildcats on our rankings because, I mean, they're 3-0 to start the season, and what do they do to open things up? They upset FCS Valpo 28-10 opening weekend.
That's what happens. NAIA plays up to beat the FCS. FCS plays up to beat the FBS. Yeah. It's just the way it is.
They did win by forfeit in week 2, so that's another dub. You'll take that every time. And then they upset NAIA number 6 Olivet Nazarene this past weekend, 52-28. They're number 25.
That's an upset. That's a drubbing.
Right. And so, I mean, when we did the outline yesterday, they were number 25. They've obviously risen the rankings since then. That's behind Devonde Alford, who's got 46 carries for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then they play Marion on October 9th. So that's going to be a really good game, for the NAIA, a really, I mean, people forget this IWU program is not that old. They just recently got their football team. And they're playing really good football right now. So hey, I mean, maybe that's the tailgate spot next year if we can get it circled on the calendar because IWU is playing really good football.
Yeah. I love seeing these smaller schools have success. It's so surprising. People don't get it. Indiana seems to be a hotbed for NAIA football. Marion, IWU. I mean, I know I'm missing
St. Francis.
St. Francis. I mean, it's unreal.
Taylor,
yeah.
Taylor's usually pretty good.
There's a lot of good teams around, and
just in general, lower level like D3, even like Wabash, DePaul can sometimes be up there. Hanover, I think, was a team that I thought about putting in their preseason because I think they were ranked or close to being ranked. So I mean,
yeah.
Indy.
These are programs that, hey, if you want to get your young kids out to a football game and don't want to have to pay an arm and a leg to take them there and everything, go to one of these games. They're not expensive by any means. It's family friendly environments. Go support these small programs. I mean, Purdue's going to get theirs. IU's going to get theirs. Ball State will get theirs, and same with Notre Dame. But, go watch an IWU game. Go watch a Marion or St. Francis. Why not? Go support them. Go have some fun. It's good football. It's still college football, and guess what? Some of these guys end up in the NFL as well.
Right. Finally, rounding out the rankings is IU. I thought about putting putting Marion or St. Francis here, but I was like, you know what? The audience isn't ready for 2 NAIA schools in the rankings. We can get them later on in the year.
And it could have put Indiana State.
Yeah, that's true. Indiana State, I think, is 2-1. So,
Yeah.
you know, even though IU is 1-2, they could still be spoiler. They're still a good team. Like people think that, like, I mean, granted, we have
They
hated
had
on
issues at quarterback.
we
They had
definitely
issues at quarterback.
we definitely have hated on IU on the podcast before, but like we we just know what the expectations are with the fan base, and we know where they are actually. And so it's obviously those are differing points of view. Some of the IU fan base thinks that IU should be playing for the Rose Bowl every year, and this year was maybe the year that it looked like it could potentially come to fruition. And we even said before the season started that like it's just not going to be that way. So they could still be a spoiler. Like I said, they're still a good team. They have Western Kentucky this weekend, so that should be a dub. That'll get them back to 500. And then 4 of their next 5 games are against ranked teams. They go to number 6 Penn State. Then they have number 20 Michigan State. Then they have number 10 Ohio State. And then I think they have somebody in the middle of Ohio State, and then number 19 Michigan. So, I mean, they could really throw a wrench into the Big Ten or potentially even the playoff if they grab a win in one of those 4 games, especially if one of those 4 wins is against Ohio State or Penn State. And I mean, we can roll our eyes at Ohio State, but I mean, Ohio State's been struggling these past few weeks, so we'll see what they look like come Big Ten season. But if Penn State and Iowa look like to be the kind of 2 front runners right now in the Big Ten, and if IU were to, I mean, they already lost to Iowa, but if they were to, slip, cause Penn State to slip up or beat Ohio State, who then turns around and beats Penn State, it could really not only take the Big Ten out of the college football playoff conversation, but could also change up who we're going to see in Indianapolis first weekend of December.
Yeah, they still can play spoiler, but they really need to get Michael Penix Jr. figured out. He's throwing more interceptions than he has touchdowns, and I mean, and they can't count the touchdowns that he throws to the other team. That's a big issue, and it's going to be tough. If there's a game on that, if there's a couple of games there that they can win, I'll say Michigan State potentially. I'm still not 100% sold on the Spartans, even though they did beat Miami, but not sold on Miami.
A game selected by the CraigCrash Wheel of Misery, Michigan State, to upset Miami. Well, what's crazy is Miami struggled to get by App State. So I even said in the video, I was like, this may be one of the easier picks to just say Michigan State, because Michigan State has looked like a strong team, and Miami has just been out of their sorts these first 3 weeks.
But I think the Ohio State game may be the best bet if you have to put money down on IU winning one of those ranked matchups, mostly because it is at IU and the Ohio State defense just hasn't been playing very well. Do I have any faith in IU's offense being able to stop Ohio State's or IU's defense being able to stop Ohio State's offense right now? I don't know, because the Ohio State offense is kind of clicking, and it's tough. I mean, they have really, really good wide receivers, and even if one quarterback's struggling, they have another 5-star quarterback in the wings waiting. So that would be tough. But I mean, it could be a shootout like it was last year at Ohio State. I don't know. I do not have any faith in IU going into Penn State and winning that game. No way. Penn State's going to be too fired up after what happened to them last year at IU. So, no, I think IU gets buried in that game.
So, just to recap, we've got number 1 as Notre Dame, number 2 Purdue, number 3 Ball State, number 4 Indiana Wesleyan, and number 5 IU. That's our Indiana Ambassador rankings, where we rank the most exciting teams in Indiana. So we'll reconvene in a couple of more weeks, see where they are after heading into those big matchups that we talked about. As we get into, it's almost October, B. Scott. Is that crazy or what? That we're almost October, which I mean is great for us because I mean you're gonna have baseball playoffs and college football in full swing and the NBA coming back, but still it's going by too fast. Let's go ahead and speaking of fast, segue. We're gonna talk about the final weekend of the IndyCar season, their championship stretch. Since we last talked IndyCar, it was right after the doubleheader weekend with them in NASCAR in late August. Since then, we've had the Bommarito Automotive Group 500 that was won by Joseph Newgarden at Gateway. He led 138 laps. In that race, Colton Herta led 101. There were 11 lead changes between 6 drivers. Pato O'Ward, Will Power, Scott McLaughlin, and Sebastian Bourdais rounded out the top 5. Then we had the Grand Prix of Portland, where Graham Rahal led the most laps, 36. Pato O'Ward led the first 28 laps, but Alex Palou, who is en route to a possible title, takes the lead on lap 86 and leads the final 24 laps in order to take the victory. There were 12 lead changes among 8 drivers in that one. Alexander Rossi, Scott Dixon, and Jack Harvey and Joseph Newgarden round out the top 5. And then this past weekend was the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey. Not a whole lot to write home about in this race, at least as far as the lead is concerned, as Colton Herta dominates, leading 91 of 95 laps. Alex Palou, Romain Grosjean, and Graham Rahal, as well as Pato O'Ward, make up the top 5. So the season rounds up at the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. That's this coming weekend. The point standings look as follows. Alex Palou leads with 517 points. He needs to finish 11th or better to win the championship. Pato O'Ward is 35 points behind, and Joseph Newgarden is third, 48 points behind the leader. So the big question, don't even need to mince too many words over this one. The big question is, will Alex Palou win the 2021 IndyCar title? It looks, for a stretch there, it looked like he may be losing his grip on it.
Yeah, it looked like Pato was surging there.
Right.
He had it. Pato had the lead for
a couple of weeks at least. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is a hot take. He's finished 12th or worse in 4 of 15 races, which, I mean, you think like, oh man, there's then in your mind that's like, okay, that's the 30% chance, that's 33% chance that could happen. It's a third of the races that he's finished 12th or worse, but also that you got to factor in where everybody else finished as well if you're looking at that kind of thing. But a couple of those races, of 2 of those 4 happened, in this last little stretch here. There was a 27th at the IMS road course, the last race that we talked about on the podcast, and then to end August was a 20th at Gateway. So it looked like the lead was slipping away for Palou. So there is a little bit of doubt. It's not as I think as much of a home run as it's been maybe in years past, where the whoever was leading,
Scott Dixon, that is a finish like 12th or better, and
right?
It's like, oh come on, why does he not finish 12th or better?
Exactly. So it's not necessarily the most dominant driver in the world, trying to be dominant still. It's somebody who is racing for their first ever title, who looked like the lead was slipping away for a hot second there. But he has seemed to have rectified those issues, and he has a win in a second place finish since those struggles. So it looks like whatever it was that was whatever issue they were having, whatever reason it was that they were struggling, or just a couple of bad weeks, it seems like those are well in the rearview mirror, and it looks like, I think, in my opinion, I think Alex Palou is going to win the IndyCar title this weekend, which is crazy to think about because, I mean, we talk about it a lot when we talk IndyCar. It's a changing of the guard. There's a lot of these young faces out there, and it's going to be really exciting to see what these teams do, not just in this last race, but next year.
It's a hot take for me. I think it's going to be really tough for him to finish less or worse than 11th. Especially, he's just going to drive. I mean, I don't know. He may drive aggressively to try to push it because he is a young driver. But for me, what's been so impressive is that this guy just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, he didn't even have a full-time ride last year. And here he is. Did he? He may have. No,
he was with Dale Coyne, wasn't he?
He was with Dale Coyne, yeah. And all of a sudden, they were like, Ganassi was like, "We'll take him," and turned him into a champion immediately. It's like, oh my gosh, oh man. But looking back on the races that he had with Dale Coyne last year, this shouldn't be all that surprising because the Dale Coyne car had some of its best finishes with Alex Palou and when he was behind the wheel. You just could see it. This young driver has what it takes to win a championship, and we're seeing it sooner than we all could have imagined. But yeah, I think it's going to be a hot take that he's going to walk away with the title. I mean, I don't know. We have seen. I mean, the fact that there's three guys that are in contention for it is a good thing. Not just like two drivers. So it is possible that he could lose it. It is very possible, but
keep in mind this is the first ever time that he's raced at Long Beach, at least in IndyCar. So I mean that's another factor too.
That is true. So, but I'm gonna still say it's a hot take just because it's a cool story to end the season on. I mean, yeah, it'd be great for Joseph Newgarden to win it, but honestly, I think if either Alex Palou or Pato O'Ward walk away with the championship, that's an even better thing for the sport in the series of IndyCar.
Yeah, it's a win-win because if Joseph wins, that was my preseason pick to win the title, and then if he doesn't, if it's O'Ward or Palou, great for the series. So I can either be selfish and root for my pick or root for the progression of IndyCar as a sport. So I mean, it's a tough decision for me, but we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big weekend for Palou. We're going to talk more in depth about like what it means and all that stuff next week. If he were to win, or we're going to talk in general about it. But before we get to that point, we need to pick a race winner. That's how we're going to end the show. Who do you think is going to win the final race of the season at the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach? Now, I thought about it for me, and I was like, I always root for the story. I want to see I want to see something really cool to cap off the year. And the cool thing to cap off the year, I always thought it was awesome in like NASCAR or wherever, when the driver who was going to win the championship won the race too. Like it's always like that added feeling because it's always super
That's
weird.
That's what NASCAR has now.
Right. Well, true.
To win the race to win the championship.
Right. Because it's super weird when like you have like just another driver that won the race, but his win is overshadowed. I mean, as it should be by. It'd be like if the NFL played like a third place game at the same time as like the Super Bowl, and they're like, "Hey, look, this guy won too." It's like, no one cares about that. No one cares about your win. Like if that's gonna happen, you hope it's like Scott Dixon or somebody who's like has won so many. He's like, I don't even keep track anymore.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's always super weird. So, like, you want that, like, cool symmetry to be how you go with it. But, of course, me being me has to look more into the stats. And then it's like, actually, you know what? I'm not going to root for that particular moment. My race winner, who I'm going to pick to win the last race of the season, is Alexander Rossi. He has won the last two races at Long Beach. It's been a couple of years since IndyCar has been there. They didn't go last year because of the pandemic. He's had a rough season, and this would be a great way to like cap it off and get momentum for next season. Because I think Alexander Rossi's too good to like have this bad of a season and then have a just as bad season next year. So I think he's going to win this race to get him out of that rut and kind of use that momentum for next year's season. So I'm going with Alexander Rossi to win this weekend's race.
Oh man, I really want to go Pato O'Ward winning the race and beating out Alex Palou.
Oh man,
for it. But to be honest, I would not be. I'm going to go with somebody that's really turned it on and really become a hot driver right now, and that's Roman Grosjean. Yeah. Come fresh off a podium. I mean, he's comfortable in the car. He's getting better week after week after week. I'm gonna go with Roman Grosjean to pull out the win in the season finale.
I like it. So you're going with Grosjean. I'll go with Rossi. Palou winning the championship. So it should be really fun. Like I said, we'll talk more about the end of the season as well as give some, because we had the schedule get released, and I thought about doing it this week, but I was like, you know what? Let's just tie a nice bow on the IndyCar season next week.
17 races next year.
17. Should be a lot of fun.
17, yeah, I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, so should be fun. We'll talk about that next week, but that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Remember, you can follow us at 3C Media Sports on Twitter, or Crash Course Podcast on Facebook. You can go to our YouTube channel, 3C Media on YouTube. That's where we've not only got this podcast, but also the MCT podcast and some other YouTube specific content. So go over there. You guys have been knocking it out of the park with support, so thank you guys on that one. You can also follow us on TikTok. We've got some TikTok specific content if you guys want to go support that as well, some shorter videos. Also, we stream live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. You can watch us live, interact with us in the chat. We had Dusty, L, everybody in the chat today. It was a lot of fun. And then also remember, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
And then you can also, again, follow me at Crash Course FM. That used to be the old handle for the show. So if you want to follow me at that end too, then you can. That is your prerogative. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the podcast. Next week we will be back. We'll be talking about some IndyCar. We'll be talking more football. As always, it'll be a lot of fun. We hope to see you there, but until then, have a good week, everybody.